Hello there! Welcome to the final look back at Disney's animated features from 1937 all the way to today and beyond. The company has gone through many changes throughout the years, starting as a small independent studio led by Walt Disney's vision to a giant media corporation that has practically taken over the world. Yet, its most popular and well-known department is still its animation unit. However, starting in the early 2000s, attention towards its animated features started to dwindle, leading to a series of disappointments. Will they get back on their feet? We will see. Where we left off, Michael Eisner had decided to close down the studio's hand-drawn animation brands and announced that all future releases will be done entirely on computers. This peeved off not only the animators who had worked at the studio since the early 1980s, but Walt Disney's own nephew Roy as well. In 2003, he started a Save Disney campaign to get Eisner voted out of the studio. In addition, Eisner's contracting disputes with Steve Jobs caused a strain in the relationship with Disney's frequent collaborator, Pixar. Meanwhile, that same year, Disney released their latest animated feature, Brother Bear, a cute little film with a nice environmental message, and though while it didn't have that classic magic the studio was known for, the story and the characters were strong enough to make it an enjoyable flick. It was a mature effort that had experienced some major story problems during production, but nonetheless came out very well. Ultimately, it did well critically and commercially, showing that hand-drawn animation was not dead. Ultimately, the massive blockbuster success of Finding Nemo earlier that year, coupled with Eisner's push towards CGI animation, did not help its cause.
Walt Disney Pictures presents Brother Bear.
Earlier the following year, Disney released what would be their final hand-drawn film, Home on the Range, a comedy western take on the Pied Piper starring cows. With Eisner persistent to get hand-drawn animation out of the way, the production was rushed, the film wasn't advertised enough, and it was released in the pre-summer season month of April. The film was a major bomb at the box office, losing Disney a lot of money, thus officially shutting down the traditional animation department. Of course, this wasn't helped by the rather low quality of Home on the Range. The film had some stiff animation, the jokes were disappointing, and the story just wasn't up to snuff. Not even Alan Menken's entertaining score could save this film. The studio that had produced such classics as Pinocchio, Beauty and the Beast, and The Jungle Book, they had finished off with a whimper rather than a bang.
You go, cowgirl!
In a story of courage,
There's stew meat.
teamwork,
Move on, bounty hunters! Now I've seen everything!
and utter madness.
Yeah, they're real. Quit staring.
Disney's Home on the Range. On April 2, bust a move.
Who put this here?
Between the releases of the last hand-drawn animated films and the attempt to enter the computer-animated marketplace, a lot of drama occurred at the Mouse House. Pixar had officially split from Disney and started looking for other studios or possibly going independent. Their animation studios in Orlando and Paris were closed down, and Disney was starting to get closer to bankruptcy. However, in 2005, there was a glimmer of hope. Michael Eisner officially resigned from the Walt Disney Company and was replaced by Bob Iger, who made a number of sterling business decisions. First, he brought Roy Disney back to the company as a consultant, and he fixed the relationship between Pixar and Disney by buying the studio and giving them complete creative control, allowing them to exist as separate studios. Finally, Iger made his best decision to date when in 2006 he assigned Pixar head John Lasseter the role of Chief Creative Officer of Walt Disney Feature Animation. While Iger had been responsible for turning Disney into a company that concentrates on poor tween-named products, there's no denying that when it comes to animation, he understood why Disney films have continued to remain popular for so many years. It wasn't because of the format or the animation style, but because the stories were well written and timeless, which is exactly the kind of philosophy that Lasseter brought to his own company, why Pixar has managed to surpass Disney as the most popular and acclaimed animation studio in the world. Before the acquisition of Pixar, Disney released their computer animated feature Chicken Little, a modern comedic retelling of the Aesop's fable. The film was considered a dead project from the start. Many of the Disney animators avoided the project as they didn't like what was coming out of the early production, and the disgust towards Chicken Little continued all the way up to its completion. Originally, it had an interesting story, revolving around the title character being sent to an insane asylum after saying that the sky was falling. Then this was changed to a typical saving the world from aliens story. Thus we have the Chicken Little we have today, and the final result was one half-cooked effort that looks like it was from the drawing board with no attempt at creativity. Most of the jokes were based on decade-old pop culture references, the whole finale with the aliens was one long missed opportunity, the animation was pitiful, and worst of all, there was no heart to the project. Nonetheless, despite a poor critical reception, Chicken Little was a success at the box office, but it seems to have been already relegated to being one of the most embarrassing entries in the Disney canon.
Some heroes are born great. Others have greatness dropped upon them. Disney's Chicken Little.
Disney's first film following John Lasseter's new job at Walt Disney Feature Animation was Meet the Robinsons, a time travel science fiction comedy. Lasseter was very disappointed with the original cut, and at the last minute ordered some changes to the film. And while the final result isn't particularly great, it probably came out better than if Lasseter hadn't come on board. There's a heart to Meet the Robinsons during the final act that pays homage to Walt Disney's original vision to keep moving forward, and the villain has some funny moments. However, elsewhere the humor is just way too quirky for its own good, and the main character just doesn't have much spunk. However, Meet the Robinsons was definitely a step in the right direction for Disney, and later that year it looked like they were already prepping for a return to that old magic.
There's no time like the future.
Now, my slave! Seize the boy! Why aren't you seizing the boy?
Meet the Robinsons.